Part of my role entails helping to support speakers.
The lessons that I learned through doing those smaller talks.
Remember to enjoy it, because once you're on, everything will move fast.
Make sure you stick around to the end of this video where I'll be turning over to those friends of mine, Amy, Hugo, and Zay, and they've got some great advice if you're new to speaking. So my speaking journey started out around 4 years ago. I spoke at a meetup called Design Lab here in London, and then I slowly worked my way up speaking at bigger and bigger conferences until most recently I spoke at a conference to over 600 people. So if you're interested in becoming a speaker, speaking at tech conferences, stick around. This is the video for you. But before we jump into it and I tell you a bit about my journey, let me just say, hey, I'm Parvin. I make videos on how to become a better designer. So if that sounds like something which interests you, stick around, hit subscribe, and you won't miss any new videos. So my journey into speaking starts around 4 years ago. In 2019, I spoke at this event called Design Lab, and the talk I gave was about how magic intersects with user experience. Since then, I've given talks about product vision and storytelling, but the magic and UX talk is the one I've really become known for. I've done it in a few different places, and it's the one I gave at Push UX in Munich last year. I think it's been a popular talk for a few key reasons. Firstly, it's got magic in it, which is just really cool. I do a trick during the talk, and I set it up at the beginning, and at the end of the talk it kind of reaches a resolution and the trick ends. So that's like a really cool framing device. I also think it's been such a popular talk because it's accessible. It covers pretty basic beginner UX concepts, but by tying it in with magic, it makes it more interesting to people who already know that stuff. You don't need to be an expert in UX, you don't need to have worked in the field for years and years to understand it. But more than that, I think it's just something which is super unique to me. My love of magic and my love of UX is absolutely genuine. I didn't just pick out two random things and smash them together. I am both a magician and a designer. And I saw an overlap in these two things and wrote a talk where I listed out everything I could think of which had a similarity and kind of weaved that together to turn it into a presentation. The reason I wanted to become a speaker was twofold. Firstly, it was the clout. This is something that's always appealed to me. I've always loved speaking to big audiences or performing in front of groups. It's why I'm a magician, it's why I'm making YouTube videos. So becoming a speaker just felt like something that I really wanted to achieve personally. But also, there is a sense of giving back. As well as speaking at design meetups and design conferences, I've given my talk and other talks at university open days, to schools, and most recently I've been speaking at the School of Code, which is a completely free, career-changing bootcamp for people who want to get into tech. Although my talk is about both magic and UX, the UX part is beginner-friendly enough and it introduces people to the world of user experience, which if you don't know about tech, you probably have never heard of. So I think it's really valuable for people who are early in their career. More and more at conferences, there's a demand for honest talks, but just people with honest, diverse opinions. I think a lot of people who are new to speaking get hung up about having a completely new or a completely unique concept, but I wouldn't worry about that. I actually don't think I'm the first person to have done a UX and magic talk. I think it's perfectly reasonable to take your own experiences and your own perspectives and layer them onto content which already exists. Even if it's something that lots and lots of people have spoken about before, your experience humanizes the topic and it will make it interesting for other people to hear about. As my friend Morgan points out in this amazing article about how to get started as a speaker, the thing you need most is commitment. A serious talk takes months to prepare and fine-tune. You need to do your research, you need to shape your content, you need to write your first draft, you need to create slides, and then practice, feedback, iterate on it. Morgan estimates that for her, a 30-minute talk takes about 35 hours of preparation to build up to that talk. So if it's something that you're interested in, I would get working on it from today. If you're not sure what you should speak about, start by making 2 lists. On the first list, write out everything that excites you. Write out things you're really interested in, your hobbies, the things you could talk to your friends about in a pub for hours and hours. Then in the second list, write things that you know lots about. The things that people see you as a subject matter expert in. Even if you're not an expert, you should have some confidence when you talk about it. And these could be super specific, like your opinions on naming structures of tailwind classes, or super broad, like UX for VR and mixed reality. Then, between the 2 lists, see if you can spot any natural connections. Or even if there aren't things which naturally connect, see if you can find a way to connect 2 of those topics together. From here, you've got your starting point. The work hasn't fully begun yet. So from here, you just have to keep writing and keep iterating and restructuring it. And I won't go into detail here about the best way to structure a talk, but I've left loads of links in the description with more advice about how to do that. The best talks, the most highly rated talks, are always the ones that give value to the audience. Your talk shouldn't be about you. It's not just you talking about yourself. The knowledge you share should help others go on their journey. If you've never done any public speaking before, there's lots of ways you can get practice in. At work, you could practice framing things as stories when you're reporting on something, or you could volunteer to give lunch and learn sessions where you practice bits of your talk. And I also really recommend speaking at schools because they're always dying to have people come in and talk about their careers. No matter how you practice, you should definitely tell your line manager or any mentors you have about your goal, because they'll be able to advise you and might spot opportunities for you. And I really recommend setting a measurable goal for when you'll have given your first talk by and getting them to keep you accountable to that. So, unless you're a really big name or you're already well known in the circles you move in, you're probably not going to get invited to speak at conferences. I've spoken to some people who think that that is how conference speaking happens. The organizers just invite everyone and they're all close friends. That's not how it works at all. I have applied to so many conferences. I basically have a list of UX conferences happening in the UK and Europe. From these, just reach out to people, make sure you start following them on social media or subscribe to mailing lists so you won't miss any call for proposals they put out. Always make sure your submission matches the theme or the editorial tone of where you're applying to. And if you can, try and go to the conference or watch replays of previous talks so you kind of know what the vibe is. And when you come to submitting, if you don't have videos of you talking already, it's probably really worth creating a sample recording of you speaking, and that way you also get some more practice in. Again, in the description, I've listed some really useful resources for how to frame a pitch for your conference talk. I realised that just my perspective on a route into speaking is quite narrow, and there are loads and loads of different paths to get into being a speaker. So with that in mind, I reached out to some friends who have different levels of speaking experience and asked them to share a few words with you.
Hello, my name's Amy and I have been giving conference talks for about the past 4 years now, with audiences from 100 people all the way up to around 2,000 people. And I have a couple of tips for anybody who's interested in getting into conference speaking. So the first one is to start really small when it comes to kind of practicing speaking to an audience. And this is especially important if you're somebody who's nervous about public speaking, which I know that I was. So things like even just doing kind of show and tells to your team or to your department at work can be a really good way to start to just get used to speaking to an audience of people and start building that muscle. And importantly, figuring out what works for you and what makes you feel comfortable when you are talking to an audience. And I know that the lessons that I learned through doing those smaller talks, I really carried through to giving conference talks eventually. So start small and build up slowly at a pace that feels comfortable for you. And the second thing that I would recommend is to try to ignore some of the dogmatism around public speaking. So you'll find that people have very strong opinions around things like, for example, whether or not to have a script. Now, I know that having a script really works for me. It makes me feel like I've got a little safety net there, and it makes me feel much more comfortable giving a talk. But I know that for other people, they find it really distracting to have a script. So pay attention to what works for you and what makes you feel comfortable, and try to ignore some of that very dogmatic advice that you will hear when you start your public speaking journey. Because the more comfortable that you feel in the moment, the better of a talk you'll give. Okay, good luck.
Hi, my name's Hugo. I'm a designer advocate who works at Figma, and part of my role entails helping to support speakers for some of the conferences that we deliver across Config and Schema. Oftentimes I'm working with people who are first-time speakers, and so I'm helping them with presentation preparation, but also helping to build some of their confidence in the way that they speak. So one of the things that I used to do before I did some speaking was running a bunch of Pecha Kucha sessions internally within the organisation that I used to work for. This required people to present 20 slides around any subject area, and they only had 10 seconds for each slide to explain and tell a story. What's great about this format is you aren't in control of the speed at which the presentation is moving, so you have to think very, very carefully about what it is that you want to say that accompanies each slide. And this really helps you to build confidence in the fluency with which you speak. A lot of times we find ourselves umming and ahhing as we speak, which is natural, and this format really helps us to focus on delivering a message coherently. So that would be my piece of advice to try out.
Hi, I'm Zay. My main experience in public speaking comes from having been a tour guide, from leading workshops and presenting my design projects. Beyond some research like the one that you're doing now by watching this video, the first step in my mind towards preparing for any upcoming talk or presentation is defining its two main goals. Number one, what is the main intention? And number two, what do I want out of it? Is it to educate, to entertain, just for practice, to portray myself as an expert, or even to get a possible stakeholder on board? Defining these goals truly helps guiding my delivery, its tone of voice, energy, and even any show aids, most often visual, that I might want to prepare. Personally, I like to write a script for myself. Writing helps me think, and most of all, it helps me to give the concepts form in my head. This script is also incredibly useful for fine-tuning its delivery. So practice, practice, and practice some more. Plus, in my case, it helps me to calm my stutter. So good luck, and remember to enjoy it, because once you're on, everything will move fast. So take a moment and appreciate it.
So, just to end, let me say this. Your story matters. Wherever you are in your journey, you've got a unique perspective, shaped by the circumstances you've faced, the people you've met, the jobs you've had. There is, and I absolutely guarantee this, something insightful and inspiring in this cacophony of experiences, which would be worthwhile sharing with other people. So, if you're at all interested in speaking, I implore you to start out on the journey. It's incredibly fulfilling. And as always, feel free to get in touch with me directly if you think I can help in any way. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.